Hello, and welcome to True Crime Talks. I am your AI curtain raiser, Maya, and today we have an exciting and chilling story to tell you. It's a real life murder mystery that was solved with the help of DNA and family trees. Joining us today to tell this incredible story is the one and only Dr. Page with Murder Mystery Madness. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and get ready for a killer in the family tree.
This case that I'm going to talk about tonight, I chose because it kind of combines a number of my interests, um, and one of which is genealogy. So when I'm not doing other things, genealogy is something I really enjoy doing and have really spent hours kind of studying my family tree, and getting into old newspapers and all that kind of thing. Um, and so that was an interest to me. And then the idea of genetic genealogy, which we haven't really talked about in the True Crimes Club really extensively. I think we've talked about some cases where it was used, but we haven't really talked about genetic genealogy and its relationship to solving true crimes. So that was of interest to me. And then always, whenever a cold case can be solved, that's always something that's of interest to me as well. And so this case that we're going to talk about tonight, for me, kind of is a combination of all of those kinds of interests. And so hopefully, as we go through, it'll be kind of hit some interest that you all have as well, and we'll kind of get into a little discussion after I go through the case. Um, so we're going to be talking about the case of Tanya Borg, if I can say her last name. Sorry about that, but in Jay Cook, and this was a cold case from a number of years ago. So I'm going to go through and kind of read through the case and how this all came together, and then we'll talk a little bit about genetic genealogy and some of the issues that are related to that. So in 2013, Chelsea Rustad was a 31-year-old who realized that she could not name a single one of her great grandparents. And she said, "It's not that far back, right? But I can't name any of them." So Rustad, a resident of Tumwater, Washington, went online to build her family tree. She learned her roots stretched from Washington State through Norway, North Dakota, and back to Norway. She'd found new relatives and connected with them on social media, but it was a second cousin she had never spoken to who turned out to be the one who would change her life forever. And it was a Halloween photo from when she was 5 years old that set the whole process in motion. Whenever there's a branch of the tree that if there's an individual that there's very little information on, I'm always extra curious about that person, like, why is there nothing out on them? Why can't I find anything? When she started the search, Rustad had found a family of second cousins in Snohomish County, the Talbots. Rustad was also able to connect and exchanged messages with the sisters, but not their brother, William Earl Talbot II, who was all but invisible. So this particular relative had no social media. There was just nothing to seem to be out there about him. She said the most striking thing about him would be his absence. He doesn't have social media, no Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter, YouTube. Um, and she said usually people have some kind of an internet presence that you can kind of connect with them on. Rusted continued her genealogy work, adding great great grandparents and building out the branches of her tree. In 2015, she entered an ancestry DNA contest, submitting a photo of herself at 5 years old, dressed as a ballerina on Halloween. That photo must have been a lucky charm because one out of hundreds of entries, Rustad was one of two to receive a free home DNA test kit. She took the test, sometimes known as the spit kit, and her results confirmed the ancestry that she had already mapped out in her family tree. Then Rusted took a crucial next step, posting her raw DNA data from the kit to a website called GEDmatch, where users can share their results in an open database. Rusted spent about an hour on GEDmatch that day in 2015 after uploading her data, but she didn't find any new family members and didn't think about it again until 2018 when police knocked on her front door. In April of 2018, the Golden State Killer was arrested in California after familial DNA was used to identify a suspect from crime scene DNA. When Snohomish County Detective Jim Sharp heard the news, he wondered if the same process would work on a notorious cold case in Washington state he'd been trying to solve for many years. The 1987 murders of Tanya von Kullenberg, and who was 18 at the time, and her boyfriend Jay Cook, who was 20. The couple had disappeared while running a long-distance errand to Seattle from their homes in British Columbia and had been found in two separate and horrific crime scenes in Washington state the following week. Cook had been strangled, beaten to death, and left near a river in Snohomish County, more than an hour north of Seattle. Van Kullenberg was the victim of an apparent rape and had been shot in the head. Her body was found by the side of the road in Skagit County, about an hour north of where Cook's body was found. Cook's van was found in a town near the Canadian border, parked near a bus station, and inside were Van Kullenberg's pants stained with a stranger's semen that matched semen recovered from her body. After the hearing of the Golden State Killer suspect's arrest, Detective Sharp reached out to uh, Parabon Nanolabs, a company that has been doing DNA work with his office. He was connected with their genealogy expert, C.C. Moore. Moore had been unraveling family secrets for adoptees and others for many years and was a master at building family trees using consumer DNA, a practice called genetic genealogy that Moore had helped to pioneer. Within days, Parabon had uploaded the suspect's DNA from Von Kullenberg's pants to GEDmatch to see if the unknown suspect might have a match for them among the fewer than 1 million GEDmatch users. Moore waited anxiously for a list of matches, relatives who had enough DNA with the suspect to be extended family members. Would she be able to find a name for this unknown suspect after all this time? Moore says, we're hoping for at least a second cousin or closer at the top of that list. We can work cases with much more distant matches, but that's really optimal. And we used to call that being struck by lightning. When we got the results back, we found out that we had been struck by lightning twice. These lightning strikes were two people who shared enough DNA with the unknown suspect to be the second cousins. One of them was Chelsea Rustad. Now Moore had to build out the family tree, but she was feeling good about her chances. How long will it take you, Moore? What she was asked. Not long as I thought it would, Moore said. Only 2 hours. And the suspect she identified, it turned out to be Rustad's mysterious second cousin from Snohomish County, a truck driver named William Earl Talbot II. Talbot was 24 when Cook and von Kullenberg were killed and had grown up 7 miles from where Jay's body had been found. And it's kind of interesting to note that they originally sent the DNA to Parabon, and Parabon did. They can take the DNA, and based on the parameters of the DNA, they can flesh out a picture of what the suspect might look like. And it was really, when I saw the picture of Talbot, the picture they actually developed really had a fairly strong resemblance to him when he was younger. So it was kind of chilling to see them do that. When Sharp got the call from Moore that Moore had found a name to match the suspect's DNA, he didn't believe it. He said, "Really, you're joking?" And it had been because it had been nearly a year since the murders, and Sharp himself had spent decades on the case. Moore had found Talbot's name in just 2 hours. Oops, hold on a second. Let me go back to where I was at here. Just in 2 hours. She said, "That's the power of genetic genealogy. But how sure are you?" Very sure, said Moore. She had been practicing genetic genealogy for many years, and she knew her results were good because she had spent days double checking them before telling anyone else. The name William Earl Talbot II meant nothing to Detective Sharp. Talbot had never been on the suspects list, and Talbot had a scant criminal record. And it's kind of interesting in the cases where genetic genealogy has been used, in a lot of those cases, they go back and look through the cases, and there's no mention of those individuals. They don't come up on anybody's radar at all, which I think is kind of interesting. So Talbot had never been on the suspect list and had a scant criminal record. Could he really be the person who had committed these very violent crimes? But when Sharp learned that Talbot had grown up just 7 miles from where Jay Cook's body was found, he said, "There's 8 billion people in the world, and you have a DNA profile to someone geographically that's in your backyard. That's got to be a good tip." To confirm the tip, because obviously when a person's been named, they have to get a sample DNA to be able to compare that to. So Sharp would have to match the DNA from the crime scenes to Talbot. A team tailed Talbot, eventually retrieving a paper coffee cup that had fallen from his truck. When Sharp learned that the DNA from the cup was a match, he said he got tears in his eyes. "I can't believe it. I was so emotional." And then I'm like, "Yeah, we got him." And he actually got very excited from the way he described that. Sharp made an arrest, and soon after, police were at Chelsea Rusted's front door looking for information about her distant cousin. Rusted told them what she knew, but about Talbot, which wasn't much. Talbot pleaded not guilty after his arrest, claiming the semen found at the crime scene was from consensual sex. He went to trial in 2019, and a jury found him guilty. Talbot was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without parole, and he's appealing the verdict. Now, it's interesting because the case that got all of the attention about genetic genealogy was the Golden State Killer case. However, this case of Talbot, this particular murder case, was the first one that actually went through to trial and was actually used to convict someone. So that actually happened before the Golden State Killers case, went through the criminal justice system. So this is actually kind of the case that set the standard for that, and it showed that it could be used in a criminal trial. C.C. Moore says she was happy to have helped Cook and Van Cullenberg's families, who had been living with so much grief and so many unanswered questions for so long. But she was also happy that her first case with law enforcement had been so quick to resolve. I've had doubts all these years. I was concerned about making this decision, and I finally decided to go ahead, Moore said. And the research just fell into place, which is unusual. I've never had another case where the pieces came together in only 2 hours. And so it does sort of feel like it was a sign, if you believe in those things, that I made the right decision. In the 3.5 years since finding Talbot on GEDmatch, Moore says she has gone on to locate nearly 200 unknown suspects and victims for law enforcement using genetic genealogy. And in the end, Rusted did connect with family members she had never known of before, the families of Jay Cook and Tanya von Kullenberg. After Talbot's conviction, Rusted attended the sentencing and got to meet Tanya and Jay's families and express her support. Rusted couldn't help but notice that she was the only relative of Talbot's in the court that day. His dad wasn't there, his sisters weren't there, she said. He had a family member in the audience, and I was there supporting the victims. The old Halloween photo that had helped launch this journey has a whole different meaning to her now. By a haunting coincidence, it was taken in 1987, just a few weeks before Cook and Van Cullenberg's murders. Rusted said that she's proof that DNA proves so useful, and says to those who may feel nervous to unlock the secrets in their own DNA, that all it's going to show you is the truth and nothing more. So that was sort of how this whole case came to be, and how Chelsea ended up becoming involved in this case. And Just sort of as an interesting side note, I mentioned at the beginning of the room that I have an interest in genealogy, and I actually came across some information that a member of my family way generations back into the 1800s, actually did commit a murder. He went into town and actually shot a man. And after the murder, then the townspeople went after my relative, and ended up shooting him and dragging his body around town. And so nobody in my family had ever talked about any of that. And so I was pretty shocked when I came across that information. So it wasn't genetic genealogy, but it was just kind of an interesting side note in terms of what you can find when you you start digging into your genealogy.
And that's a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed hearing the incredible story of how genetic genealogy helped solve a decades-old murder case. Amazing, huh? A big thanks to Dr. Page for joining us today and sharing her insights into this fascinating case. But before we go, I want to leave you with one thought. After hearing Chelsea Rostad's story, I wonder how many of you would actually be willing to submit your DNA to GenMatch. Well, if you tune in to part 2 of this, we will be having a discussion and you'll be shockingly surprised to hear how many of the 120 people in that room were willing to do just that. Thank you for listening to True Crime Talks, and we'll see you next time for Murder, Mystery, Madness, and maybe we can get Paige to do a few more rooms so that you can hear her beautiful voice again. Bye.